Narcissus didn't die because he was vain. He died because he was alone. That's the thing. That's the problem with narcissism.
Lack of connection.
Is the disconnect. Welcome back to the Mind Change Podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean. Before we get started today, I just want to take a second to remind you, please hit the subscribe button, like, share, download, do all the things that really help us get this content out to more and more people. Today, we're diving into a topic that is quite popular right now, a little bit of a buzz phrase, but also is probably weaponized, overused, and deeply misunderstood. Today, we're going to be talking about narcissism. And joining me again, my partner, Kent McKean. Thanks for coming.
We are going to also make this word, this idea, a little controversial, possibly, in this episode. So,
us controversial?
No.
Never.
Yeah. So looking forward to diving in. It's, man, what an interesting topic this is going to be. It's actually something that has been asked for numerous times, even as we work with clients or just people giving feedback of mostly having to do with what do I do with my partner who is, or what do I do with my family member who is, or all of these different things typically is where it comes up. And so we thought it would be a really good idea to create an entire episode around narcissism and everything that brings, or at least some of what that brings into the conversation. So can I get us started with asking you a question?
Sure.
Okay. So what do you want to challenge, as we're diving into the controversial aspects? What do you want to challenge the traditional view of narcissism with?
What do I want to challenge it with? I think neuroscience, for one. I mean, neuroscience is the basis of so much of what we do here with Mind Change. But also, I think just understanding us as humans and the fact that this label of being a narcissist or like being with a narcissist is creating a lot of people being stuck.
Okay, so people being stuck, are you talking about the people who feel that they are partnered with, in relationship with someone who is a narcissist, or are you talking about the person who is labeled that being stuck?
Both.
Okay.
That's what we're seeing is both of these people. Let's say you're diagnosed with or labeled or called or believe that you are a narcissist. Mm-hmm. You're stuck because the narrative around this is a narcissist does not have the ability to, one of the main things people say is they're not able to be empathetic or to put themselves in a position of reflection or change.
To feel or think outside of themselves, basically.
Basically. Well, then those people are stuck. Mm-hmm. Then also, we've seen such a rise in this idea around the victimization of people who were with narcissists, raised by, in a relationship with, maybe the country being led by there's so many narratives out there around because I'm dealing with or have dealt with a narcissist, there's nothing I can do. I'm now almost irrevocably stuck or impacted by my relationship with a narcissist.
So we're putting the label or and we'll talk more about that later, but this idea around someone being a narcissist, we are putting them in a stuck position, and chaining ourselves to a stuck position of now I'm in this and what do I do? And it's nothing.
Right. Or because I was raised by a narcissist, because I was partnered with a narcissist, because my child is a narcissist, all these various things, then it almost like closes the chapter on, oh, well, gosh, there's really no way to change out of that.
Which is actually the commonality in most labels, diseases, ailments, like chronic things that are like, well, this is what you're going to have to deal with. So this just fits right into that category.
Absolutely. So for us, I don't believe that we're ever stuck. I don't believe neuroscience says that that's true. In fact, it says quite the opposite. So of course, when we see a label like this being weaponized, then it's really good to talk about, because I just personally don't like anything that keeps people stuck. I like to see people be free, because I know being set free from a lot of the different things I was doing was huge for me. So I think the thing that we hope to do today in this episode is help people understand narcissism more, the relationship to narcissism more, and that it is more of a personality trait that becomes visible and also really becomes a coping mechanism because of emotional injury often. And from the get-go, our goal is not to defend someone who might be so this is the other big thing. For us, you are not a narcissist. You are doing narcissism. That would be my take on this.
So you're at the very beginning of this episode,
just putting it right out there,
telling people that there is no such thing as a narcissist. Rather, people are doing narcissism or doing narcissistic traits.
Is that what you heard me say?
Well, I want to make sure, because people are going to
Did
push
I say
back.
There's no such thing as a narcissist? I don't think that's what I said. So I'm going to take a really, really great book reference is Rethinking Narcissism, Dr. Craig Malkin.
Okay,
author. So I really like what he did in this, which is putting narcissism more on a spectrum. And then, unfortunately, spectrum is a bit of a buzzword right now too, but let's just say spectrum, which is, and we'll get really into this, which is fascinating and I love it. But there's polar opposite ends of what we might call the narcissism spectrum. So there's what you're talking about so there's no such thing as a narcissist. Most people are then referring to people who have narcissistic personality disorder, which is extraordinarily rare.
Tell me the percentage. It's there.
It's like 1%.
Yeah, 1% to 2% is the diagnosed.
Right.
Of the whole population of the almost 8 billion people.
And that's based on diagnostic criteria that's only been finalized even in the last 25 years or so. So 50 to 25 years, we've been sort of dialing this down into narcissistic personality disorder. Even that, if someone were to come diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder, would I say that that person isn't a narcissist? Well, I don't believe our behaviors define us as I am this. So I take issue with the linguistics of that.
Right.
Do I think there are people out there doing it so excellently, that they tick every box that psychologists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists would use to diagnose this? For sure. Are they nearly impossible people to have a relationship with? More than likely. Does that mean they cannot change? Well, I don't know. Because to change, someone first has to want it more than the outcome that they're getting from that desired coping mechanism. Again, subconsciously, right? So that's why it's going to be so important for us to get into the nitty gritty about narcissism. But so I wouldn't say that I'm someone who doesn't believe in narcissism. I absolutely believe in it as character traits. I don't believe that someone is either genetically completely malfunctioning to the degree of never being able to improve. I don't believe that.
In other words, like this is their label and that's what they are for the rest of their life because we discovered this about them.
Right.
Right.
Could they be too far gone? And what do I mean by too far gone? They have been so conditioned for very good reasons that to be empathetic, to think outside of themselves, to look at themselves in a way that might be critical or even constructively critical is so against their survival that it would be impossible for them to do that because we would be triggering a survival mechanism in them. That's where I would think that person would be quote unquote too far gone. Now, I don't know that I necessarily believe anyone is ever too far gone. Could that person, even if they're deeply, deeply, deeply rooted in that for very good reason, and their entire life has been systematically built to support their doing narcissism to this degree, could they not have a life or death experience that changes something, creates some light in there somewhere? I believe that could happen too.
I mean, very, very different scenario, but there was no clear reason why you should have all of a sudden started getting well physically. You were on the path of like, well, it's kind of like too far gone. Like what diseases keep popping up, ailments keep being there, more and more fragility in your health. Like you were going downhill. There wasn't like except something life and death situation happened.
Right. Absolutely. And my mind changed.
Right.
So completely from the victimization to, oh my gosh, I'm actually powerful. So that was, call it divine, whatever you want to call it. That was the big thing for me. So I do believe that other people could have that. Would I go as far to say I don't believe in narcissism? Not at all. Or that narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, is not a thing. Absolutely believe that's a thing.
Yeah, just like ailments and issues and things that can be measured by blood, or like they're real things. Even someone doing ADHD or like there's stuff happening in the brain that is creating this 100%.
Right. And I would argue there is brain research that shows in particular regions of the brain, changes in the brain with people who are showing extreme narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah, this is the whole gray matter stuff. And yeah.
Yes. My argument to that would be that their brain developed into that. They weren't born with that. It developed into that. So that speaks right back to my main point, which is there is a reason people are doing narcissism to varying degrees.
Okay.
And that is often, again, due to early childhood deviations, we'll just say, from our natural, designed, healthy ways of functioning. Now, again, just for anybody out there, that does not mean we're blaming our parents or our environment for someone becoming a narcissist. We just don't speak in blame terms. We're looking for factors that are contributing. And that's important because it helps us understand. If we understand, we can then move our scope out a little bit about how to deal with this. So that helps both someone possibly labeled as a narcissist. It also helps people who may have been in relationship or are currently in relationship with a narcissist.
Right, because the why doesn't ever get to the the how, which is all we're looking for in mind change. If someone wants, transformation change, whether they're on one side or the other side of the narcissistic person, it's the how it was developed. You can have two people in the same household growing up. One becomes that characteristic, traits, all of these things, and the other doesn't. So is it really the parents? Is it this? Is it how? It's how they perceived it. It's how things came in. It's how it was input. That's all that matters. And so when we discover how they input the information, you can start to deconstruct it. Okay. So you talked about the spectrum, this spectrum of narcissism. Can you talk about the two ends of the spectrum, perhaps healthy narcissism and toxic narcissism?
So I will say these are not my frames.
Okay.
This is, again, from the book, Rethinking Narcissism, Dr. Craig Malkin.
And tell me, because you've brought that up a couple of times, like what is it about this book that I mean, it's not necessarily what has created all of your thoughts and insight around this, but it had some really pivotal portions. So tell me why.
If we're talking about narcissism, he almost has to be talked about. He's one of the world's foremost researchers on this. And what I appreciate is I think Harvard Medical School, he's a director of something. I have his information somewhere, but let's just say he's a smart man. And he has dedicated a lot of his life to researching narcissism. So what I really appreciate about his book is that it is taking it from a more scientific look rather than a psychoanalytical look.
Which is honestly, you look up a book on narcissism, I would say the majority of them will be from a psychoanalytical
From
frame.
a therapist.
Yeah, from a therapist frame.
Right.
And which is fine, but it's not going to give you, it's going to give you a certain perspective.
Right. From those particular frameworks, it's pathologizing. There is a pathology. So we have narcissism, if we're using that topic, as a dis-ease, disorder. It's a problem, and it's a diagnosable problem. So we are using this diagnosis to label and very often condemn and put it into a very small box. So what I appreciate about Dr. Malkin's approach is that it's kind of coming outside of that a little bit and saying, okay, but what does research tell us? And, does so many wonderful things. It's his languaging that says there is healthy narcissism and toxic narcissism. And he uses a continuum, a spectrum, where healthy narcissism, it sounds like an oxymoron, is in the middle. We've got NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, extreme version of that on this end of the spectrum, far end of the spectrum. But then on the other end of the spectrum, and I find this fascinating, is what he labels echoism. And there's a reason for that. But it is basically the other end, which we might call extreme people pleasers. People with no sense of self. Their sense of self is a complete reflection of everybody else, what everyone else thinks about them. Versus you've got the other end of the spectrum, which is, I don't care what anyone else thinks about me. I don't care about anyone else.
I don't even know to care or aware.
They're not there.
Yes.
In one, to some degree.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's really him that says that. So from the book, it's more healthy narcissism, which I honestly wouldn't call it that personally. It's just.
What might you, this is putting you on the spot, but what might you call it?
I would just see it being a healthy human, like being a regulated, well-adjusted, self-aware human.
Okay.
I will tell you his version of this is I think the way he words it is, he would like to see people wearing a little bit more rose-colored glasses so that we err on the side of, I'm good, things are good, everything's good. Seeing things a little bit with a rosier tint.
Okay.
That's what I think, again, paraphrasing of large amount of information. He would call healthy narcissism. So that I am believing in me that I have good things. I am a good thing. Good things should come to me, that there's probably good in every situation.
Yeah, to be able to overlook the things in life that maybe could be considered faults or mistakes or whatever. It's like, it's okay. Like, I'm good.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of he's got a little bit more of a bent toward positive, it's his wording, rose-colored glasses, that's a little bit more of the healthy version of narcissism. Okay. Where when we've got toxic narcissism or NPD is so far down on the other side of that spectrum, which is, again, what people will say, no empathy. And I'll tell you, research shows that very frequently, even people diagnosed NPD, they can exhibit empathy in certain situations. They're just not typical certain situations. So to say that a narcissist completely lacks the ability to have empathy is incorrect. But I do think that so many of the labels that we hear and the ways that it's getting promoted out there, it's just, some of it is just misinformation, but it helps us we love a label. We love a label. We love to put people in a category and label them, but we also love to be able to justify our part in something or neglect our part in something by just utilizing a label.
It makes us as humans feel, even if it's not real safety, safer to have something labeled and contained and answered. Uncertainty for people can create minor anxiousness, and so it's just easier that way.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me, I know you already hit on it a little bit, but tell me a little bit more about childhood origins of narcissistic traits, maybe.
Okay. Now again, this is not to ever justify behavior. Mm-hmm. The behavior shown by narcissists to be in a relationship with is abhorrent. It is very, very, very difficult. We're not taking away from that whatsoever. But it is important for us to understand how somebody gets to that level and how we fall on the spectrum. Because remember, every single one of us falls on that spectrum somewhere. If we're taking it from the way that Dr. Malkin kind of presents it. And I think it's not untrue. Most of us, that as humans, we're capable of every emotion, every feeling, every scenario, every situation. We are capable of it. It's just, where do we fall on that spectrum? So if we're taking it from a narcissistic standpoint, we all fall on that spectrum somewhere. All of us.
You said that this is an important part of even explaining this, is like, obviously not excusing the behaviors later in life, but understanding. And I just want to throw out there, one of the things that people have a difficult time with, people who are presenting and creating these kind of personalities, narcissistic, is the fact that they can't, quote unquote, can't empathize or have compassion outside of them. And it's just all about them. And so if that's something that bothers us about someone, then actually this part that you're about to go into, I think is very important, because if we claim that they're this way, what is needed is understanding, compassion. Like, it's not meaning that we're letting someone do something and like, oh, well, that's just the way they are because of, right? But there's something that happens in the human heart and in the human body when we understand someone, when there is compassion there. So
the fear, I'm just going to speak to the fear of that, because the fear is the same with almost any of these different things when we start to try to understand a behavior rather than just judge it.
Okay.
Because so many people have stayed in a relationship or were victims of, as a child, a narcissistic parent or someone higher on the spectrum, let's just say. And that is difficult, and it creates unique situations, unique environmental situations for that person. So I think what I'm seeing is I'm hearing a lot, even when clients come in, they're like, oh, I had a nice narcissistic mother. I had a narcissistic father. And that's sort of end of story. And so that's why it's like, but no, we should dig into that further. We should go into that further, because if we don't go into it further within them, it's very difficult for us to go into it further with ourselves. Here's the fear. People very frequently think, if I show empathy towards this, if I seek understanding, if I'm curious, if I go deeper into why someone might be exhibiting these behaviors, I'm going to allow it. That's what. And very frequently, especially people who were in a relationship with someone who was labeled narcissistic.
Or are currently.
Or, yes. They should be out of that relationship. They should be out. They should be. There's abuse happening. Somehow when we call it narcissistic abuse, we're like specially categorizing it. But it is just abuse. It is. Now, I'm not saying just in a way of like, oh, well, it's just abuse. Abuse is horrible, terrible. You shouldn't be involved in that. You should be out of it. This is where it gets tricky. So hold on to your hats out there if you find yourself triggery around this. You need two particular people. It's like, it's polarity of all sorts. It's the yin, the yang, the balance is to be in a relationship with someone who's a narcissist. We have to more than likely be very far down on that spectrum so that there's a polarity happening. There's something that keeps the balance going.
And can I add that with the work that we do with Mind Change, understanding that we are calling into, unconsciously calling into being what we already have experienced in the past for the purpose of trying to resolve it, but also to stay safe in what we already know.
Yes.
So even if it's like, oh, and my mom was this way, and like, it's not that we're like, I'm going to find someone but there is something that happens on a neurobiological level that is like wanting and calling forth a similar scenario, even if we hate it.
Absolutely.
And so this is, yeah.
Right. So I think expanding our curiosity a little bit more, understanding a little bit more is scary to people who were in a situation and found it very difficult to get out. People who are currently in a situation and are like, I get this and we understand this. So please hear me. We understand when our body is doing a coping mechanism of some sort, that's what we need to be doing at that time with as much as we know. Mm-hmm. For people in the situation right now, it's almost like they need more ammunition, more good reason, more motivation to get out of this abusive, toxic relationship. And so labeling that or recognizing that someone might be a narcissist, that's what they're doing, is they're garnering more motivation to say, this is why I'm being treated this way, and this is why it's wrong. And so that puts them on sort of that other end of the spectrum, where I am only me because you are you, sort of a thing.
Like, this is happening to me because it's
Yes.
outsourcing the power that someone holds within.
Yes. So we constantly are looking for who's at more fault. And in those situations, it has to be that the narcissist is at more fault. Otherwise, these type of people have no good reason to leave. But they do. They have every good reason to leave. This person doesn't have to be labeled a narcissist for you to leave toxic, abusive behavior. But that's where we find ourselves. So I'm aware of that. We're going to stay within that framework because people are in that framework out there. But so I'm speaking to anyone who's like, don't try to tell me that there's a very good reason someone's a narcissist. I don't care. I just don't want to be in a relationship with them. Good. But there's probably very good reason you did in the first place.
And to prevent it from continuing down the line with another person that is seemingly different, but really could be the same, it's important to dig in.
Okay, so you want to hear something very interesting. Just speaking from many, many years of experience in working with people. Remember, polarity is a real thing. Okay, the earth shows us this.
Yeah.
I have witnessed people come out of what they would have described as a very toxic relationship with a narcissist. And they come out and they spend years dealing with the trauma of being in a relationship with a narcissist. And they want to make sure they never get into a relationship with someone who's narcissistic again. Mm-hmm. So what they end up doing, now some people do, and that's just because we recreate.
Yeah.
If there's enough of a switch to be like, I will never, they often, because of the lack of introspection with knowledge, there's a lot of therapy introspection out there, but introspection with knowledge of like, what are the contributing factors? What is the neuroscience behind this? What's happening in the nervous system? Like more of a holistic approach rather than just a conscious psychological approach, right? They spend all this time and then they find someone else. And what they end up finding is someone very far down on the other end of the spectrum. So one of those, I am only me because you are you. Like I define my entire existence based on what you think, what you feel, what you say. I'm here for you and only you. That's what gives me love in life, is by serving others. And then, so the polarity becomes that this person who was the victim of narcissism in a narcissistic relationship starts to take on some of the more narcissistic traits. If we were to kind of take an outside perspective and look, the way that they would language, the way that they would act, the way completely unconsciously would be a little bit more like, I'm the only one that really matters here. Only my pain matters. Only the way I see things matter. And they will be projecting that on their new partner who, isn't a narcissist on this end of the spectrum, but is on very far this end of the spectrum on the narcissism spectrum. They will become more narcissistic traits, exhibit more narcissistic traits. That's why this information is important. It is really important because there are, oh my heavens, countless books, courses, coaches, various support groups, Facebook pages, narcissistic support groups, like Victims of Narcissism support. There's entire courses around it. There's entire programs. There's entire like mastermind groups that you become a part of to like, okay.
Certain therapists like hone in on this is their niche.
This is their specialty.
Yeah.
Okay. If they do not have the information that explains, in one sense, how we get there, that these are just traits that we all possess, and that what really matters is how we are in relationship with our past.
What we're holding, what meaning we've made around it, how we're acting and doing life, what our automatic programming is, what our mode of operation is now based on what's happened to us in the past. How we're wired.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
If we don't have some awareness around that or some help with that, we're going to fall right back into the same situation, but possibly on the other end of the pole.
Okay. And does that then also mean that we just need the information and that's enough? Again, I always ask these questions, but you did say the importance of awareness, right? Like the importance of understanding our past or understanding their past and understanding where it came from. So if you were someone who wasn't just psychoanalyzing, if you were someone who did have the fuller spectrum and the understanding of how someone got to where they got to, how I got to where I got to, does it automatically shift the story?
No, because the story hasn't changed.
Yes.
The story has to change. And when we say the story has to change, we're not talking about just cognitive reframing, which is what I'd say the vast majority of people out there, even if they say they're doing subconscious rewiring, they're doing cognitive reframing, which is conscious level work. And that has helped a lot of people to some degree. Real change change from one thing to another thing that changes the production without having to try really hard or constantly affirm or constantly work on or always be, is changing the wiring, changing the experiences at a neurobiological level.
And when you say changing the programming, that like what exact, just for audience maybe that it's newer to mind change, like what exactly are you talking about?
It's the way we hold our experiences.
Okay, so
it's memory.
On a subconscious level, the way we hold things by default rather than like maybe what used to be there, being able to change how we intake new information and new experiences based on how we have now deconstructed our perception of the past.
Okay. So let's take this from this. It's a great segue into talking about some of the childhood origins.
Great, go for it.
Of narcissism. And whenever I say narcissism, I'm talking about the probably negative end of the spectrum, somewhere in the negative end of the spectrum, right? So very common contributing factors. If you have someone who is diagnosed NPD or falls very high on the narcissistic personality trait scale, there is adverse childhood experiences. ACEs is what we've called them, right? And a study published in 2024 links adverse childhood experiences to later on developing narcissistic traits, especially with those with insecure attachment or inconsistent parenting. So common threads for someone who might be higher on that narcissism spectrum: emotional neglect, conditional love. And that sometimes looks really different than other people think it does. So, I've got a great story in just a minute that kind of highlights this, but it can be also if mirroring in childhood was not being done in a authentic way. So if a parent was mirroring emotions in a incongruent way, so being like in very where they should be happy and calm or something, they were like angry. So inconsistency of emotions where a child's own system as a little one who's learning to mirror is consistently like contradictory. That is also conditional parenting. That's like,
I've done that with like feeling a lot of anger, feeling a lot of frustration in the moment. And then I'm like, let me just change how I'm talking to my girls and let's make sure we do it this way and everything's okay. But like deeply in my nervous system and body, I am not. So that would be an example, one example of that. Yeah.
Yes. And there are many, many, many other factors, but in almost anyone I've ever dealt with that diagnosed narcissism, shows very strong traits, has childhood trauma. Now, the interesting thing is they will often be unaware of it, disconnected from it. So you're not really going to get much out of that. It's oftentimes you're hearing it from other members of the family that you can put the pieces together. But it's such a disconnect from self, which of course then, if we're disconnected from self, what do we give out? We only give what we have. So in effect, one of the ways that we could say, characteristics of narcissism is they're completely disconnected from others emotionally, physically sometimes, on extreme cases. Just the awareness is not there. The actual energetic connection is not there.
Because it wasn't learned.
Because it was not learned.
Or I'll say it was ill learned is probably a better way. It's not that they're like, I don't know what to do. They know what to do. It's just not congruent with humanness, like authenticity.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So if this is what a child is experiencing and many other things, obviously, what might a child growing up in one of those environments start to believe about themselves and then others?
Okay, so this is where there's a great story. And Dr. Craig Malkin does talk about this story in the book as well. But do you know the story of Narcissus?
Yes, like the origin of this word, the mythology. Yes.
Greek mythology. So are you familiar with the story?
Yeah, I mean, fill me in. But yes, he looked at his reflection. I mean, he fell in love with himself, all of that, but fill it in.
Yes. So, I mean, that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of it, is like this guy, he's like super good looking, and everybody's in love with him, and he just won't give anybody the time of day. And then he comes across this pool of water and he sees his reflection, and he's so enamored by his reflection that he won't move away from it. And he just wastes away and dies looking at himself. Okay. Narcissism. This is where we get this. Narcissus, right? There's so many other parts of this story that people neglect. People make this a story of vanity and make this. So we often connect someone with narcissism thinking that they're like the hottest hot that ever hotted.
Like they think so highly of themselves that everyone else is like so down here. So, they're narcissistic because everything's about them, because they really think they're so awesome.
And a lot of people will take vanity, which is really very different origins, but they'll take vanity and call that narcissism. And it's really not a story about vanity. So this is what's super interesting. This is where Dr. Malkin gets this idea of echoism.
Okay.
So there's more players to this story. So Echo was a woodland nymph, I believe. And Echo was in love with Narcissus, as was evidently everybody else. And so Echo, in an attempt to get attention, constantly speaking, constantly trying to make everybody happy, like always all the time, and like trying to be noticed, be seen, be accepted, be loved by constant giving of and being like attentive
for other people.
Yeah. So her name was Echo. Then we have Nemesis. Nemesis is another Greek goddess figure, sort of. And so Nemesis watches all of this happen, and both Echo and Narcissus are cursed. So Narcissus is cursed by the reflection, the pool, the reflecting pool being something that sucks him in. Echo is removed of her voice, and she can only speak out what other people speak. So she becomes just
the echo.
So that right there speaks to the spectrum that we're talking about, and that there are many other factors at play here. So Echo kind of represents that far end of the spectrum where someone has lost their entire self, their entire voice, for the sake of others, to be loved, to be accepted.
Yeah, there's a need.
Yes.
So they're doing something to try to get that need filled.
Right. For her, perceiving Narcissus doesn't love her because of something that there's wrong with her. Not like, no, Narcissus has got some issues, man. So she takes that upon herself, and she makes that about herself, and then becomes this way.
Okay.
And then you've got, Nemesis, who sort of the wise watcher of all of this, decides to show that there's consequences on both sides of the spectrum, right? So there's a lot of allegory and symbolism here. Even Nemesis she's not really, I think it's important to say she's not doing this out of cruelty. It's really, she's trying to show the reflection of consequence on either side.
Which is funny, all these labels that we use. My arch nemesis, my, narcissist. Like, it's not necessarily used in the way that it was originally written and created. But anyways.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking to what we were talking about before, which was childhood environments.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting. So if you look a little bit, I will say Greek mythology isn't very abundant in information on this, but we've got Narcissus's parents. Very important. Okay. So we've got Cephasus. Cephasus was he was a river god. okay, god of the river. And in myth, he was not a nurturing father. So he was very inconsistent, kind of like the river. So like always there, but never there, present, always flowing, sometimes swelling, sometimes reducing down to famine, right? So that was really reflected in his parenting. And then you've got Leurope, I believe is how you pronounce it. I'm not exactly, listen, Greek mythology is not my thing. But she was a nymph and she was Narcissus's mother. She was, in Greek mythology, actually raped by Cephalus. And so that is how Narcissus was conceived, was through rape. So that he had a very violent conception. And so in realizing she's pregnant and what's going to happen out of this, and obviously, let's just say Cephalus probably wasn't just an inconsistent father. He was probably also an inconsistent lover, wasn't even a lover. He was a rapist. So
he was a taker. He was
yes.
Yeah.
So she gives birth to Narcissus and she goes to a seer, someone who supposedly sees the future. And this was the quote she got from the seer. He will live a long life as long as he never knows himself. So even though he's conceived in a very horrible situation, and Leurope is still a mother, but instead of trusting her own self and her own mothering, nurturing nature, she outsources that to a seer who says he'll live a long time, which is what a mother wants, but he needs to not know himself. So we've got these contributing factors. So it isn't vanity. It's not that Narcissus was just born beautiful and everyone's telling him he's beautiful. And so he gets this big head and therefore he becomes a narcissist. He has an inconsistent father, a father who's there but not really there. So he's getting very feast or famine sort of love, acceptance from his father as a child. And then he's got this mother who wants to keep him alive. And her only way of connecting with him is keep him from knowing himself. So she focuses on something like his beauty that's how she connects with him is you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. And don't let anyone tell you anything other than that. And keeping him focused on his looks rather than being introspective, because if she believes the seer, if he gets introspective, he's going to die. So there, you've got some pretty interesting family dynamics that I think really help us understand he's coming from generational trauma. Mm-hmm. He is the child born of rape and a lot of clear dysfunction there. And so that's where it makes a lot of sense that he is turning out the way that he's turning out, right? So I think that if we understand, and we only take such a small little glimpse of this from Greek mythology, and we're like, don't like yourself too much. Don't think you're too good looking, or you may fall in love with your reflection and die. It's more about disconnection. This is so important for us to understand, is from both sides of the spectrum. If you are someone who has been diagnosed, labeled narcissistic, it's the disconnection that's the problem. You are so disconnected from self.
From your inherent worth, from your inherent goodness, from all of like the truth about who you really are.
Probably for very good reason.
Sure.
We could probably track that back in childhood. We're not blaming it on the parents. I wouldn't blame Cephalus. I'm sure if we looked in Cephalus's history, we're going to find good reasons that he felt entitled to rape somebody. There's
and not safe enough or present enough to stick around and to be there and all of these
absolutely
other things.
This stuff generationally comes down. Doesn't make any of it right, okay, justifiable, nothing, right? but there's history there. And so I think that the origin story of this is important, right? Narcissist, this is key. Please, everybody hear me. Even if you were in relationship with a narcissist, the narcissism wasn't the problem. I know that's, stick with me for a second.
Yes, it was. If they were just.
It's the disconnection that's the problem.
Okay, disconnection from, just reiterate.
Well, for the narcissist, disconnection from self.
Yes.
For the person in relationship with the narcissist, the disconnection from like any real connection to the narcissist. There's you are continually trying to connect to someone who cannot do it.
Because you can only give what you have. And if you're not connected to yourself, you can't give yourself fully to the person.
And then we end up in the echo story where someone makes it about themselves. They're the reason that the narcissist isn't connecting. And they probably for years spent all sorts of time emotionally, intellectually cognitively creating stories around why they're not connecting with this person. And more than likely, if they fall in the echo spectrum, they're blaming it on themselves for some reason. To the point where it gets so bad that they have to get out of this. And the only way they can really get out of this is by dumping on the amount of abuse that's happening. We're not saying it's not happening, but that it's the narcissist's problem. And it will never change because narcissists never change. So it will never change. Now you have permission to leave. And again, that's the problem, is where the power lies. The problem is in, if the only reason you can leave is because you're with someone who will never change, you're the one discounting all the years of abuse. No, the abuse is wrong. I don't care if it's the nicest guy you've ever seen. If there's abuse, he's really not. Then that's the good reason to get out. He doesn't have to be a narcissist. So that's where the labels really help them. So I get it. And I get why the labels are important, and then why they latch onto it so deeply for the foreseeable future. It's because it's what helped them get away. So we get that, right? But please hear me say this if you've heard nothing else. Narcissus didn't die because he was vain. He died because he was alone. That's the thing. That's the problem with narcissism.
Lack of connection.
Is the disconnect. And it falls over on all of the relationships that they have. If you have developed strong narcissistic tendencies and you have a child, you cannot connect to that child. Not because you're a narcissist, because you've developed these tendencies for very good reasons somewhere inside of you. This has become your coping strategy. And even though you have a child who in some original part of you would, of course, want to connect with, there's an inability to do so, not because of a diagnosis, but because of a mode of operation that you're in alignment with. It's important to know that. I feel that it's very important to know these things. It's so strong. Because if you want out of it from either side of the spectrum, if you are a self-professed victim of a narcissistic relationship, or if you are or have been diagnosed or think that you might be, usually they say if you think you might be a narcissist, you probably aren't, simply because that's part of introspection, that there's hope, but you have to go deeper. If you just rely on a label, I'm the victim of, or they are, I am, it's going to show up somewhere else. I nearly guarantee you it's going to show up somewhere else. It's going to call you to another part of the spectrum. We don't get off of that spectrum. We have to work with it.
So with there being a spectrum, with there being all of this research, with there being even the story and understanding how this came about, obviously this is a very, very old story. And yet it seems that it is very recently trendy that this label of narcissist is coming about. Now, it's not that it's new in the psychological world of, therapy and things like that. It's been talked about for decades, but especially recent years, there's been a lot of trendiness around labeling, calling, especially online, things like that. So talk about that for a moment.
The rise of social media and niching and speaking to people's pain is huge to this. So it's very interesting if you've ever heard life coach marketers, people who are, or they call them like self-help, personal development marketers. They want, if you're in the field of helping somebody, coaching other people, they bring you in and tell you how to market this. Okay. They say, speak to their pain, niche to their pain. So you have to keep speaking about the pain.
To what? Attract more people?
Right.
Keep people in?
So that you become the one of like, I uniquely see you, hear you, feel you. I'm the one that's going to uniquely validate you and say, you were not the problem here. And people listen, yes. Can we just say we're all human? And yes, please make me not the problem and make you the problem instead. That is a human. So let's not judge anybody by that. That's human, very human. There are so many people out there niching to this, primarily because they're hurt. Because hurt people. And there's very few resources out there that work to resolve the pain.
Versus?
We just recycle it. We label it, we call it something, we medicate it, we dole it out.
We get out of one situation to escape it, and now I'm out of it, but we just recreate it in some other form or fashion.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I really think kind of the pop psychology out there that is so strong on the internet is making this bigger. And you've heard it. Everyone's a narcissist. It's constant. Right? We hear about this all the time. You've had some experience with this personally, right?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to?
Oh yeah, I can definitely talk about that. So we're talking about labels, right? This is the thing of especially social media being able to, it's funny, like you wouldn't walk up to someone to their face, most people, and say, this is who you are. But people tend to just feel free to do that all over their social media pages. Okay. Anyways, I was someone who grew up with an innate hatred towards labels, let's call it. I didn't want to be pigeonholed. I didn't want to be told that this is the way I am, or this is the way I should be or have to be. Now, a lot of that is because I actually fell straight into the lifestyle of live this way, be this way, should be this way in my religious upbringing, which there's a lot of good moral things that I learned, grew from, lived out of with the most integrity that I could. Great. But there was also a lot of, if you're not this way, maybe not told to me, sometimes told to me, like you are bad, or if you do this, then you are this. And I didn't want to be part of any of those labels. I didn't want to be this kind of person or this kind of person or this kind of person, of course, mostly unconsciously. So as I grew up, I really tried to stay away from labels. Even looking back in high school, like I didn't want to be just the jock or just the drama person or just the musician or just like, so I kind of hopped around and I was friends with everyone and friends with this, and in one sense sort of appeased each group. And if you're looking at which spectrum I ended up being on with the narcissistic spectrum, it would have been more the echo of like, I would do anything to try to make someone not upset, so that they wouldn't label me, so that I wouldn't fit into this category, so that I would ever, right? But also that also made me like, whatever you think about me actually affects me so much, even though I would be like, I don't even care. Like I'm my own person. I'm not one of these people. I'm not this, but deep down, deeply impacted by what I felt and perceived others felt and perceived about me, which then became my entire being. On the outside, looking and seeming very confident, very together, very with it. And in a lot of ways, I held myself well. I pushed hard. I lived the best I could, but deep, deep down, so much self, like hatred and self deprecation. And just like, I was so down on myself internally all the time. I did something that was wrong or that I perceived was wrong. I would beat myself up for it. Now, I wouldn't do this out loud. And I wouldn't do this to be seen for like, oh, I'm so bad. Like I actually got to a place where I would really try to pretend that everything was okay, because I didn't want to be seen in like this terribleness that I felt that I was.
And it made you sort of aloof, standoffish, right? People would say maybe you were a little snobbish or...
Yeah, I mean, I think deep down, really, it was a disconnect, right? It was disconnecting from me, therefore disconnecting from others, and wanting to present something that I really deeply desired, which was joy and peace and happiness and everything's good, and to have those rose-colored glasses and everything. But I still was holding, as we're talking about, like, all these other stories about myself, about life, about what others thought, and all of that. And so a lot of other things happen in between there. Let's bring it up to speed in our relationship. We have had programs and ways that we found each other. There were certain things about me that you loved, that this seemingly confident, like whatever, I don't care what other people think kind of thing. I have this drive. I want to go somewhere, all of that. And the same with you, like things I saw in you. I saw this like authenticity, this realness. This is what I actually yearned for within myself, right? So I'm trying to seek it out because of the echo. And then our relationship, as we're married and different things, I would never have said this at the time because I was completely unconscious of it. But my worth, my life, my feeling good about me was completely echoed or outsourced to you. So I ended up becoming what someone might, call, there's like a covert and an overt narcissist, right? Now that really the covert would be like the NPD, and the overt would be that. Right. The covert would be like the echo of like, oh, I'm not good. I'm not, I'm not sure. But then trying, and constantly focus on myself because of that. So there was a lot of stuff in our relationship that, looking back, I realized, that was actually abusive. That was like, I was holding you down, putting you in certain things, like it has to be this way. This is because I was so insecure and so unattached to my true worth in essence.
Denying reality.
Yes, that was a huge one. Like everything's fine, everything's good. And because I just didn't want to connect with the feelings that I had, which again, the feelings I had didn't make it, well, it made it real, but didn't necessarily mean those things were real. It just, that was the deeper truth for me at the time about myself, negative. So we had, we tried a lot of different things in our marriage, different, people we got with, programs, counseling. We ended up going to this one therapist. This is quite a while ago.
Long time ago.
Maybe like 8 years ago, or so.
Longer than that, I think.
Was it? So anyways, yeah, probably. We went, and it was like, it was just one of those things of like, we got to do some intensive work. We have to do some things. And so we sat down right there in front of her on the couch. My favorite thing, to be spotlighted, especially at the time. Any kind of deep conversation in my heart and mind and body felt very uncomfortable, because I didn't want to be perceived as the way I already perceived myself, which was bad, basically. Not enough. And so as we're talking and as we're discussing, she basically ends up saying in front, the three of us, like, well, I need to be honest with you here. What I'm not technically diagnosing is what she said, but I would almost want to do some tests and do some different things because I believe that you are a narcissist. And and I don't really remember anything that happened after that. I blacked out. But it brought me back to childhood, pigeonholing, labeling, and this is something I actually want everyone to hear. I, at the time, wasn't even in touch, again, disconnected from, wasn't even in touch with the fact of how badly I deeply felt about myself. Mm-hmm. All my mistakes, all the things that I don't do right, all the so ingrained in that, in my mind and body, that to then be called this, it wasn't even on the surface, it seemed like, I don't want to be called that. I don't think I am that. What it ended up doing was making me finally be, in one sense, seen for the worst that I could be. In my mind, a narcissist, all I can care about, think about is myself, and I don't care about anybody else. Which the reality of me being an echo was all I care about is other people's feelings and thoughts and whatever. And so it's this big, messed up, jumbled idea around narcissism, labeling. It actually, the whole system is tweaked and kinked. And so I studied it out. I read books, all of these different things. But what I came to realize in the end was just how deeply, finally realizing just how deeply insecure I was and how deeply uncaring and loving I was for me, which then meant I was trying to get validation from you, from every situation, from everyone around me, so that I could feel some sense of value and worth. And until I started digging in and doing work around those childhood things that you talked about at the beginning, and really around you, and this has been an ongoing evolution for me personally with you, of recognizing, I care so deeply about how you care about me that then it makes me this seemingly nice guy, but it's very, very manipulative, because it's never about, this is what I think, this is what I want, this is what I believe. It's, this is what I think because you think that, right? This is what I want. Wait, you want this, right? But if you don't want this, and it gets really messed up, and it forces a dynamic in our relationship, right? It forced it where it's I'm okay if you're okay. So a lot of other stuff with that, but.
Right. And that, honestly, I think, had we not been, we didn't even probably realize it at the time, the journey we were on, but had we not been maybe a little further along in our journey, the fact that you received a label from a therapist as being a narcissist, that could have given me, this is the power in these labels, that could have given me that sort of green light to be like, oh, well, you're never going to change. This is never going to work. I am finally being validated for all the things that I've been feeling all these years. I'm not crazy. So you need to go.
Can you really quickly give, for those who don't know the situation, maybe give the very brief background on how you grew up in a family with similar things, and then of course you met me and matched it in a different way?
Right. So I think if this were a therapy model, you could probably say with accuracy that my mother has strong narcissistic tendencies. She's a little higher on the spectrum of that. Yeah. for good reason. Here's the thing. Like, I understand. I'm so grateful I didn't have that label when I was a child or younger, or first, like, being very in touch with the fact that maybe my past wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. But later on, like, I'm like, oh, for sure, she fits some of those tendencies, many of those tendencies. And so what's the real problem with that was the disconnect. But I know now, having looked back and dealt with a lot of the stuff that I needed to deal with, like really actually changing the wiring, it makes complete sense. Her inability to connect, feeling like that was very unsafe to do. She had been victimized tremendously as a child and through most of her life. So, like, I get that. It makes sense. But that is what I had in me, was very strongly being in relationship with people who, because of their own things, didn't have much to give me. So I'm sitting there like, hey, love me, see me, what about me? And the messaging came through of like, my needs are stronger than your needs. So I'm the bigger focus here. So that flipped that parent-child relationship quite a bit. So, of course, I'm looking for that not to I wasn't even aware of the pattern, honestly, before I got married. I knew things were dysfunctional. I just wasn't aware of the patterns. So, I was actively looking for someone who didn't look like my family. But that for me wasn't an addict of some sort, wasn't physically abusive. And there's my criteria right there. You don't beat me and you're not addicted to anything. Yay!
And this is why she chose me, folks. Really narrowed it down. I was the pick of the litter.
But what was familiar in you was that inconsistency, that desperate need to be loved, validated, helped, seen, cared for. But on the outside, I'm not going to show that. On the outside, I'm going to make it seem like I'm taking care of you and you should be grateful for even the scraps that you're given. That's sort of that was not told to me. That was my perception when I was a child. And so recreated that in our marriage. So then you get this, we sought so much help for our marriage, which was just a very fun conglomeration of both of our coping mechanisms coming together. What was familiar to us was dysfunction, and what was not familiar to us was all the stuff that we get to play around with now. But yeah, so I thought that would be interesting because you have dealt with being labeled that as a therapist.
Yeah,
and I know as
someone who heard that right there on the couch next to me.
And she even talked to me separately about, the likelihood of him changing. Narcissists don't change. He can't even see that this is going on. So how's he going to change it? Which is true. If you can't see what's going on, you're not going to change it. But the label keeps you stuck there. Rather than what would be the very good reasons that he uses this coping mechanism to this extreme and using that as a way in. That would have been more possible. Thankfully, I did not really listen to her, partially because in the separate conversation, she reveals to me that she herself is a victim of 2 narcissistic relationships and is therefore divorced twice. She had married a narcissist twice, and now she has made it her work to help other people. I was like, oh, even then when I didn't understand all that I understand now, I was like, seems like there might be a filter there. Seems like there might be a little bit of projection happening there. Didn't even probably know those words at the time. But yeah, that becomes the danger of us overusing, misusing these labels as strongly as I think we have.
And that is one of the reasons I think I tried to scoot anybody like feeling upset with me or I just wanted to not be labeled in any, as a child, as a teenager, as a, in my young adulthood, in our relationship, like I just wanted to scoot any kind of uncomfortable label or whatever that was going to keep me stuck, that felt like I was going to, because I already felt stuck. So
yeah, it falls into this kind of trap we have these days, which is we're diagnosing to define and dismiss. It's like we won't just come right and be worthy and find our own worth and value and say no to disruptive, dysfunctional, unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah.
We've not been taught how to do that. Because we've not been taught how to do that, we've stayed in relationships, working environments, school situations. We've stayed in quote unquote toxic environments way longer than we should have. Way longer.
I definitely did that in certain relationships, career, like staying in.
Oh, for so many reasons.
For so many reasons. It's the right thing, or what are they going to think, or.
Sure. So we've been sort of taught to stay in, dismiss, like outsource.
Disconnect from what we're really wanting, needing, feeling.
Disconnect from self.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
That speaks to
both
both ends of the spectrum. Yes. That is the problem. So people, they're using this label as the stamp of approval on like, now I can get out. And now you can't question. Now you can't bring up all of my doubts that I'm leaving this. Now you can't blame me for staying this long. It's a blame game. People just want to not be blamed.
And that is exactly where I was at.
Yes. So I get that. We're not going to judge that. That's understandable.
Yeah.
But there's a different way, a different approach that takes all the blame out.
Okay.
And that is, well, I'll just say that's mind change, because we don't really deal in blame. We deal in, if you want to think about it very basically, like, let's take it from a computer analogy. Like, if something's malfunctioning on the computer, on your phone, something's wrong with the coding. There's a virus. There's something in there. If it was coded to work this way, but it's working this way, something's in the coding. There's a bug. Get it out, and everything works the way it's supposed to work.
Can I ask you on this? Because we're really pushing back against this whole idea of like, someone's doing this to me and all of that, versus like understanding, okay, this is where they're at. This is why it's happening. And the wiring needs to change. So does that mean they're imagining all of these things like, so these things aren't really that bad? I just want to help people that might be feeling a little like they want to push back on some of this and really help them understand like where you're coming from with it.
Great. Thank you. All of you people out there listening or watching who are like, yeah, but you don't know me.
Or them.
You don't know that situation. No, I don't. And we are not taking away from the fact that you were probably in a very horrible situation that you did not deserve, that is not your fault, that
shouldn't have happened.
Should not have happened. So please hear me say that. Like, you were not imagining it. It's quite possible that someone made you think everything was your fault. Someone denied your reality constantly. Someone was gaslighting you to the degree of you questioning everything that you know. It's quite possible that you were trying harder and harder and harder just to have them get worse and worse and worse. Very, very likely impossible. Okay. You were not imagining it. You didn't deserve it. It shouldn't have happened. It was wrong. It was abuse. No one should ever tolerate that. So that we are on the same page with that.
So
100%.
Then, do they just reclaim their power by getting out of the situation? is that going to be, because that is what a lot of people just try to do. I got to get out of this relationship, this person, they're toxic, is that how they reclaim their power?
For some people, getting out of the situation is your first step, for sure.
Great, first step.
That's the first step. And then after that, you may need some validation, because part of that whole dynamic is, and if we understand why, even from your example, if we understand someone doing what might on the outside seem like, I'm unaffected, whatever you say doesn't really land, whatever you're saying is not true, is very frequently the thick mask that they have put on, that they may even believe is the real them. But deeply underneath that is a protection mechanism, because they feel really, really not good underneath, but they're disconnected from that.
Whether it's overt or covert.
Sure.
Like covert is like, deep down they feel bad about themselves. But even someone who's like, look at how amazing I am, and I don't even care about you. Not like the truth is.
But you've got to own your side of the spectrum. Are you on the echo spectrum?
If they're on that.
Have you completely lost your voice? So are you saying, even if that is like, oh, well, poor, poor Tom, my narcissistic husband. So you're saying maybe there's a wounded little boy inside that I just need to stay here and keep trying to reach? No. But you've got, if that's your reaction to what I'm saying, you're on the spectrum, the echo spectrum, far down on the echo spectrum. Your first thing is that if it's a toxic, abusive relationship, get out. Even if it's short term, get out, give yourself some clarity, deal with your part of that, where you land on the spectrum, what's going on inside of you, not from a fault perspective, from an introspection perspective.
In other words, regardless of like what you're doing with the other person, it's vital to reconnect with you so that you can make decisions that are going to be most beneficial in the long run, versus being disconnected and making this big decisions. You got to connect with yourself first.
Go back to the story about the reflecting pool in and of itself. The reflecting pool is not bad. It shows us. Remember, that's what Nemesis was there to do, was show, reflect, mirror. We need to do that too. We need to look in the mirror. The only thing that's going to break either one of these is looking in the mirror. Are we willing to go deeper than the reflection? Are we willing to go a little bit deeper into that? That's vital to actually healing, whether you identify as the victim or if you identify as someone who struggles with being on the narcissistic side of the spectrum.
So I've heard you a number of times talk about, like, if you're in a abusive situation, if you are in that relationship, like, get out. I've heard you say that a number of times. How did you deal with this?
Right. I did get out of it because I got out of the program. I got out of the script. I was able to go deeply enough within myself where I was like, wait, there's some familiarity to this. Now, obviously, I did mind change work. So that's what helped me.
Wait a second. Are you saying that in a relationship, if I'm the one with all of these things and bringing it, and you shift things and change things, it can call change in me as well and in the dynamic?
It can. I am not saying it always does.
Sure.
But it can. And honestly, for me, I felt like I had enough reason to leave. But I was like, there's something keeping me here that maybe I haven't explored enough.
And that was?
What was keeping me there?
No, what was it that you realized you hadn't explored enough? Or what was keeping you there? Sure.
That's what I hadn't explored enough. What is keeping me here still? So then I had to go in. So this was very informational for me. Am I staying because I come from a family who stays with abusive, toxic people too long? Is that my pattern? Is that what I'm recreating here? Is there something deeper than that? And I had to go into me. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody. If you're being, I mean, I'm not going to give anybody advice here. If something is telling you to leave, if you're not safe in some way, then I would say get out, because at least to give yourself some time, some clarity to go deeper into you. I needed to know how I got there in the first place, how I was contributing to the patterns. I had to see the patterns clearer, which means I had to go into your patterns. Like, what if you're not just a narcissist? What if there's something deeper in there? Like, what if there's more? Just to inform myself. Now, here's the thing. Had I been looking for permission to leave, giving that to some other thing rather than it just being mine, like, I would have probably gone different directions. But I was like, what's my part in this? And without saying I didn't make up my mind whether I was leaving or I was going. I just knew I needed to go deeper with me.
Which is the difference between staying a victim and being really a victor for yourself. Of like, okay, I'm going to stand for myself first. I'm going to deal with things within me and see what happens. I was just having lunch with a really good friend who early on had been married and for various reasons left that relationship, in his words, too early. He bailed too early and then got into another marriage. Left that relationship too late. So I'm asking this because you're saying, you can get out or stay and work on yourself, but you're not staying in the same position. Like, how would someone know? You're just like, oh, well, I need to get out because this isn't healthy, and you're bailing too early versus staying too late.
Yeah, I mean, that's really tough to say, especially to whoever might be listening to this when I actually don't know your situation.
And you wouldn't
I would
tell
say,
them one way or the
don't
other.
stay ever. Don't ever stay. If you even think this might be toxic, abusive, not good. But that doesn't mean that you physically always. Some people, yes, you need to physically leave. There is a way to leave without leaving physically. And I don't mean just ignore, disconnect. I mean taking that time to go deep inside. I left the norm, the written, scripted pattern program that you and I were doing constantly. I left that. I abandoned that. I left that. Now, it was not easy, and I was called back into it multiple times. But by doing that, that allowed me to get really clear on what was really happening not from a, like, if I'm not giving myself permission to leave, then I'm looking for permission outside of me, which means I'm going to have to focus more on and possibly even help create more of an environment to make it exceedingly obvious that I shouldn't be there. Because I need the permission from outside. So I gave myself permission against all sort of cultural, religious, like, blocks. I was like, I'm not staying in this marriage if things don't change. Gave myself permission. But then I was like, but what actually needs to change? That I wasn't sure of yet. And I kept focusing on you. Well, you need to change this, and he needs to change this, and he needs to change this, and this needs to stop, and da-da-da. But then what I had to leave to get clarity was our doing this. So I was like, well, I'm a piece of this too. So, and it was, many people might think that I'm like, oh, now, well, you're abandoning yourself by looking to see where you might be part of the problem. I disagree. I was engaging with myself more. Remember, that's Narcissus's problem, was he was only seeing the reflection. He was only seeing himself as beautiful, as flawless.
Oh, and if you only saw he's the problem, me, he's the problem, I'm fine, then you would be perhaps missing out on the disconnect in yourself or the new connection or reconnection that you can have with certain things as well, regardless of the outcome.
Yes. And again, I was in no physical danger. I was, there, I hate to have to justify. You can't ever justify people. This is the problem. If people don't know themselves enough, if they come from tragic, disconnected, neglectful things in their environments from their childhood, or even in school, or even, young adult, then this has become sort of a norm for them. They don't know how to question that. So I needed to go deeper to see what was the problem for me. So I think that's the real problem, is we're having to justify, well, how bad does it have to get to leave? And then some people just are chronic leavers. They're avoiders. So they're leaving, like you said, your friend, he bailed too early. That was his way out of him, out of both, right? So there was probably things she was doing. There were probably things he was doing. So I think that's the bigger piece of it, for me at least. And again, I'm giving nobody out there,
this is what you do.
Yes. But I'm saying that there is more to this, and we cannot just slap a label of narcissism on the situation, get out, and think we're actually going to be okay.
Because we need to invite curiosity, not only in the person and understanding, but in ourselves. We need to invite the curiosity over judgment.
Yes.
Okay. So shifting this, understanding this, how do we do that? How do we, in one sense, reframe, even though we're not just doing a conscious reframe, but within ourselves through curiosity? How are we reframing the victim mentality into a victor, or at least a conscious healer mentality?
So I think the first thing this is really interesting. So this is something I haven't brought up before, but it's also from Dr. Craig Malkin's book, Rethinking Narcissism. He says that he identifies that the deep core need on this spectrum is to feel special. That's the thing. So you take it so far on that they feel special, but their specialness elevates them above where I'm the only one that can be special. Otherwise, there is no special.
Okay, that's the highest level NPD.
Right. Then you've got echo, where I'm only special if someone thinks I'm special.
Okay.
Sort of a thing. And so you've got this spectrum of specialness, which is interesting because then we see narcissism spectrum in a lot of different ways. Any of us that are practitioners have worked with a client who's like, my disease is the worst disease. My situation is the worst situation. I'm the best at this. I will never get well. They want to feel special. Their unique brand of feeling bad is special. It's what makes them special and stand out. If you take that away from them, they have nothing. That's a form of narcissism, if we're taking it from not that label, but the spectrum, right? So it's about feeling special. So I think then if we understand that, then the first step is validation. Now, not validation from everybody of you go, good job leaving that narcissist. They're terrible. You suffered through so much. Mm-hmm. You may need that in the beginning. Honestly, any more than a couple conversations beyond that, you're just rehearsing it now or practicing it now. You actually didn't take the validation and integrate it. You're just, it's the echo. It's just coming and going and coming
Not
and
actually
going.
doing anything, changing anything inside of me. It's just
Right. So I'm going to talk about a bit of a different type of validation. A validation where you have proof, you have resources that you are worthy.
okay.
That you are like, you can trust your gut. You are trustworthy. Even if you weren't, it's going back and changing those things, starting to validate that. So what is the whole like etymology of validate? Well, maybe it's not the etymology as much as it's the definition of it. To validate is something that's already true. You're reaffirming that it's true. You're validating it. So it's already true. And you're just valid. That's valid. That's true. For so many people, they're seeking validation, they think, but it isn't validation. They want definition first. They want it to be defined first. That's what they're seeking is definition. We've been defined. We already are. It's already in there. And so we need to find that deep validation. That's the first step. Now, what does that look like? Looks different for different people. Obviously, if I had found anything else that worked as well as mind change, I'd be talking about that. But for me, it's been mind change. So that's all I got. Is going in and knowing more about how did I get here? Without the judgment, without the blame, without the shame, all of that. Wait, how did I get here? How am I me right now? And not that defines me. It's the me right now. How did I get to be this person? And then I seek that out. And if there's something that I'm like, ooh, I went because of, a maladaption in my childhood, hurt, passed down, generational, my parents doing the absolute best job that they could, but still not being what I needed as a child, going back and going, there's where we went off the rails to begin with. Rewire that, give myself actual, not just consciously, but like known, felt, seen, heard, tasted, touched, like it becomes real because it's neurobiologically wired.
And all the other old wiring is taken out, right? That's important. Not just like, oh, I have this new frame.
Yep. That changes things. Then I get to the next step and I'm like, well, of course I did this and found this and did this because there was that. Well, now that there's not this, now what's going to be there? And I rebuild me more in alignment with original design. And that's really big. So we start to see, we start to see the patterns rather than just the person. Because so often we're looking for the person who did us wrong, the person who hurt us, or maybe it's even us. I'm the person who's wrong, who's bad, who's doing all these things. That's like, see the pattern. The pattern takes all the persons into accountability, but also how we got there in the first place and how it's perpetuating. So we name the pattern, not just the person.
So I think the pattern allows us to understand, can create curiosity, can create compassion, all of this. The person, the label, the person, that thing really just creates the blame and stuckness. So there's a very big difference there.
And when we do that, the next part is that it really takes care of our power problem because it shifts the power from outside of us back to inside of us.
Okay.
And then when we have power, when we're powerful inside of us, we have a lot more agency, a lot more sovereignty. We sort of understand things a little bit better, not just from a conscious point of view, but from like a holistic point of view. Then we can start to get curious. And then it allows us to be curious about people's behaviors rather than labeling. Because we can, we just want to go and be like, oh, narcissist, gaslighter, insecure, whatever. We just, they're type A, they're a control freak, they're a loser, we just boom, 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 as a way of avoiding getting involved with these people. and avoiding having to have like boundaries or worth or value. What if we just have boundaries, worth, and value? And then people can be doing their thing and I don't have to play with it, but I don't have to label them. I don't have to call them names. I don't have to, as the only way to stay away from this kind of behavior. Mm-hmm. Now it's my power radiates out. It takes care of most of it anyway, because they don't want to play with me. If I'm in my power, if I'm good, if I see the good in me and therefore I see the good in them, and like those people I don't fit into their pattern anymore. So they don't want to play with me, which good. Yay. Isn't it nice when we mutually don't want to play? We don't have to call names. We just can respect each other as humans, but be like, we don't play the same game right now. Yay.
Or it offers the possibility of them coming and playing on your playground rather than on theirs, right?
Yeah, which is awesome. And that happens a lot, but people don't typically believe it unless they've already experienced it. So yeah, for those skeptics out there, it can happen. So there's like, we speak about, and of course in Mind Change, we talk a lot about victim versus victor. Mm-hmm. And so sort of that, some of the victim statements, right, and belief systems, patterns, and programs. I'm broken. I was manipulated. I will never recover from this. I'm like forever maimed, traumatized by my relationship with this narcissist. Like I'm always going to have to deal with this.
Yeah, there's scar that will never heal or whatever.
Right. Or I'm always going to have to battle to feel this way, see this way because I was raised by a narcissist, something like that. It sort of perceives that we are always going to struggle with this, right?
Okay.
Versus like, oh, I recognize the pattern and I can play with the spectrum. If I see it's a spectrum and I see I have choice and agency, I get to choose where I fall on that spectrum. And if I've got that range of emotions, then I can see where different, a little bit up here, a little bit here, and I can play with that to like be the best me that I can be in any situation with anyone I might be. Because remember, we're all on that spectrum. We all have that. So in like understanding more, because I come from this situation that I've now deeply invested in and figured out and saw the patterns and the programs, I know exactly how to play with anyone who comes into my field of reference. That would be one. Another languaging often we hear in the victim states of narcissistic abuse is they took everything from me. They took everything. My sanity, all my love, all my effort, all my value, all my everything. They gave everything to them. They just
my time, my years, my whatever.
Yes. And see, the problem is that is still giving them the power. So now they still hold the power. That narcissist, wherever they are, who you may never see again, they took everything from me. You're still giving them the power to take everything. Wait, so you've nothing? You have nothing. You are nothing. You have nothing left. That's not a wonderful thing to reinforce.
And that's a disconnect from,
reality.
Your real, inherent, true, valuable self.
Yes. And so reframing that to like, they took nothing. In fact, I was given information. I was given valuable insight. Not that whole like placating thing that we do of like, oh, this made me stronger. This like gave me all but it may have allowed us to reconnect with something that was already there. It may have forced us to go deeper than we had gone before. We're not validating and saying that was a good thing. We're just saying that this is what I've taken from it. See, this is what I've taken from it. Now who's in control? Now who has the power? I've taken. And this is what I'm doing with it. So maybe another thing of, they were the narcissist, like, oh, they're just a narcissist and everything that happened, it's because they were a narcissist. What if I'm like going deeper in and understanding like that is a person who feels very, very, very small inside. they're very alone. They're very disconnected, even from their very self. What if that's the narrative, rather?
Yeah, they're human.
It doesn't mean I go play with that person or justify their behavior or set up my best friend with them. Heck to the no. But it changes my frame of reference with them. And remember that because we work in a polarity, because we are always moving away or towards something, I would rather hold this in a space that's good, that's pulling me more toward good, right? Rather than if they're the narcissist, then narcissists need a victim. Well, am I going to keep identifying with that? Or no? And I'm not going to make them the narcissist. I'm going to make them what they really are. I'm not making them this way. I'm reflecting, right? The reflecting pool.
Yeah.
Just being nemesis here. They're hurting. They're small. They're shallow. And I don't mean that in a negative, like, name-calling way. That's as far as they can go with themselves. And they're so disconnected. Remember, Narcissus didn't die because of pain. He died because he was alone. That's tragic. That's sad. And that's a really different way of looking at that. Also, like, I can't trust people. Man, that person is still working you. They are still controlling your narrative.
Because if we have, and I know this from experience, that if we have a really, really hard time trusting either other people, a certain gender, a certain type of person, or whatever, or that person, whoever that is, usually it's because there's a lack of trust and connection within yourself in some form or fashion.
Yes. So those are just some of the initial things, some of the things that we want to help people with if someone were to come and identify either as a narcissist or the victim of a relationship with a narcissist. These are the approaches that we're going to take if they're willing. And it really helps shift the power, which is important. That's the thing. That's the real problem. Remember the disconnect. Mm-hmm. The disconnect is what fuels both ends of the spectrum of narcissism. It is the problem with both polarities. And we never want to play on one extreme end of the polarity, right? So we want to find that middle. To find that middle, the power needs to be shifted back to us. And that's what I feel like we really can do in Mind Change.
So what do you do then if someone maybe becomes, we're talking about like reconnecting with yourself. What if someone's just really attached to the victim story, to these things that you're talking about, these old identities they're doing, to be like, what would you do?
Right. Well, that's very similar to the way a narcissist operates, interestingly enough, no, I'm not going to connect to anyone else that's out here. I'm just going to keep focusing on what's here, what's with me, what's going on with me, what defines me, what makes me, me, So I would say, and if someone's very attached to their being a victim of this thing, there's good reasons for that.
Yeah.
The question is, are you willing to change that?
Change
your relationship with the victimization. We know that if someone's doing something, they're getting something from it always. Secondary gain. Even if it's the narcissist gets something too. They definitely get something. They get to stay disconnected. Now we're all going, but yeah, no, that's not good. If they believe connection for you even, which you're not a narcissist, but some of what you were doing was, if the closer I get to people, the more that they criticize me and expect me to, and they try to pigeonhole me. They try to put me in this set of behaviors, and they're going to not like what I'm doing, who I am and what I think. And they're going to constantly be at me. So it was a very understandable coping mechanism to push that away, to disconnect from that.
And disconnect from my own presence and my own being, because if there's a sense of if there's a sense of validating incorrectly, but validating this lack of self-worth, this part of me that isn't good, if I'm connected to that, then that doesn't feel good. So I'd rather distance myself from that, which means that I'm like up in my head, and which makes me like not really here when I'm here, because just being silent, being with myself, being with one person, being seen, being heard within myself and with another person would potentially be dangerous. So the gain for me would be to not feel those things.
Mm-hmm. And for the victim, staying identified as the victim is a lot more comforting, because it's not my fault. Because for years and years and years, that's probably what they were doing. This is my fault. I'm trying harder. What is going on with me? What's wrong? You know, they did that. And to feel for some time that you're not to blame feels so good.
Well, this was a big part of, if you're going back to like our story, the first half of even before the first half, when you started getting really sick, like there had been a lot of this going on covertly that we were not recognizing, that we didn't understand. And when you got, really sick, and obviously, and then there's a lot of story there, but got well, something shifted in you. And there was a difference there. And so with the difference being, you're not going to hold the same type of connection that you had with yourself, which then forced me to have to connect with you and myself differently.
Yes. So I get, that's our approach, is if someone's really tied to their victim side of the story. Yes. Okay. Good job. Do you want to change? Because there we're talking on the spectrum too. The narcissist problem is, are they going to be willing to look a little bit deeper and change? And we can go the same extreme on the victim side of it too, and be like, are you willing to go a little bit deeper to really get change?
And do you want to share a little bit about what someone would do if they're willing to go deeper? Like, let's say someone is willing to face themselves, not in a fine, but like in a, okay, let me find what may be here. Let me find the disconnects within myself. I see and feel the disconnect in relationship in some form or fashion, whether you are the person in, let's call it more the victim role or whatever, the echo role, or the person who is more in the, narcissistic role. Like if you're seeing yourself in that and someone's open to shifting and changing, how would they go about that? What are some of the steps?
Well, I mean, just like we do anything, like I'd love for Narcissus to come and, if we could break him away from the reflection for a hot minute, I would be like, so tell me about your dad, and not just talk about it, but I'm going to look for the steps. So we don't do talk therapy. That is not what we do. We're looking for the building blocks, but we're going to affirm, this is the difference. We're going to affirm the coping mechanisms for what they are, their coping mechanisms, their survival strategies. Yes, yay, good job. Do you like the way that it feels though? Do you like the consequences of that? If not, what if we could do it better? What if you could feel safer, more connected, more loved, and have really different consequences?
And understanding the how, not the whole thing of like, so tell me about your father, not for the purpose of psychoanalyzing, but the how. How did this person get to where their emotional needs were unmet? Yeah. How did they get to, and then once we understand the how, that's when you can dig in and deconstruct it.
Yes.
Wow. So recap us.
Yes.
We have narcissism. Is it just a label?
It is out there. It shouldn't be. We miss so much by overusing this label and misunderstanding this information. It's detrimental. It's very detrimental, because it's keeping people stuck in a narrative that it's not informed very well.
Yeah, it is a response from pain, environmental situations, things like that. But
it's just going to keep people more stuck.
okay. So in other words, labeling limits healing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So what's the call to action?
Well, I think obviously this is really just more informative, hopefully. I mean, we just want to provide an alternate approach, maybe perspective on this for people, because mind change is a modality, but it is more of a mindset. It's more of a way of approaching everything, who we are, what we do, all of that stuff. So I think that we provide these episodes to run a little counter to some of the other narratives out there, because we want to provide other perspectives that help move things a little bit, get things a little bit unstuck. Most of the things out there are just doubling down, going deeper into the victimization or the pathology of it. That's what I'm seeing. It's either going to make you a stronger victim or more deeply pathologize narcissism. So those keep people stuck, and we want people to be free. The whole point of recent neuroscience development is to say we are not stuck.
Yeah. Our brains are plastic. Our nervous system can shift and change. Like everything is changeable in the human body.
We can change. That gives us agency, sovereignty, puts us back into contact with more of a powerful design. And everything out there is trying to take away from us and ask for our resources, ask for our time, our energy, our bodies. It's asking us to give it out. And that's not where we're going to find all these things. It's in. So anything that can take us more in, but not just from a metaphysical, energetic perspective, but also let's let the mind and the body and the spirit work together. Let's inform it on all levels so that we can heal from all those different aspects. Then we'll have true freedom and healing.
And so if this is true, that our body, our mind, our spirit, like everything is changeable, transformable, evolutionary, all of these different things, what does that tell us then about connection with others and relationships that we have with our parents, with our spouses, with our partners, with our children, even when they're really hard, even if this narcissistic kind of thing is there? Like, what does that, if we can change everything here, is it possible for relationships to truly, truly change?
Absolutely. But there needs to be real connection first. And that starts with us connecting with us. Like, we can't keep expecting everyone else to get it right. We've got to get it right inside of us. Then we can recognize, finally, the other people out there who are doing that too. And the more of us that come and do that together, the more we have hope of breaking generational cycles, changing some of these narratives out there, creating a space for people to come and get true healing.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that last bit. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank all of you for joining us once again on the Mind Change podcast, where we are changing the world one mind at a time. Please don't forget to keep continuing to leave us those wonderful 5-star reviews. It really helps us to understand what we're saying, what we're doing, how we're connecting with you, and also gives us opportunities to know what it is that you're looking for. So thanks for doing that.